For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa Curran. I'm a committee member of LoveTech. And LoveTech is a charity set up by women that live and work in the Isle of Man for girls and women in the Isle of Man to inspire and empower in science, technology, engineering and maths. We are a charity, so we take our funding is from sponsors or from donations. So if you enjoy this event, please consider making a small donation to help us with our cause. Tonight's event is kindly sponsored by Ramsey Crookall, who sponsor our mentor programme. Our mentor programme is a key element of what we do at LoveTech because elevating and role modelling is a huge part of encouraging girls and women to consider roles in STEM. So putting these ladies on the stage and elevating their profile and hearing their stories is an important element of encouraging other women, but also children. Most of our events are for children. We don't do a huge amount for adults, but recently we have started to do these mentor panels to help support maybe students or people that are considering career change. We had a strategy day last week for LoveTech, and one of the amazing stories that came out was that one of our mentors was already a mentor for LoveTech and working in software programming, and she came to one of our events, and she came to a space-related event, and at that event she realised that she was wanting to work in space and had kind of ruled it out for herself. And that event triggered her then going on to completely changing her career, and she now works for a space startup. Wow. She only told us this on Thursday, so we're kind of blown away because we're so focused on inspiring children a lot of the time, but also women have changing careers, want to change career, or just be inspired by people around them. They don't even need to be working in STEM. So I hope you find this evening interesting. Unfortunately, Jenny has been taken ill, so we have got our 3 amigos, and I'll be grilling them. But please save any questions. We'll ask questions at the end, or come up and ask them. But if you want to know anything further about LoveTech, there's obviously leaflets on your seats, or come up and ask myself or Deb or Jane back. We're all here representing LoveTech today. So the first thing, I suppose, is to get them to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Georgia. Can you give us a little bit about your background and why you do what you do and how you ended up there?
Yeah, so I'm Georgia. I'm a qualified actuary at Zurich, so naturally super mathsy, without taking up too much time. I am born and raised in the Isle of Man. Back in high school doing my A-levels, I did maths, physics and economics, and throughout my whole life, always driven by maths. I couldn't tell you why. I naturally wanted to do those puzzles or spend all of my time doing my times tables as quick as possible. It was something that was just within me. And when I was doing my A-levels, I did a personal study into why fewer girls did maths at A-level, because there was only 2 or 3 of us compared to the class of 20. And when I heard about what LoveTech were doing, it really resonated with everything I'd done in my own personal studies. But in my A-level years, I became ill with glandular fever, and that really knocked me back. I suffered with kind of chronic fatigue for a long time with that. And I was meant to go away and do a degree doing actuarial science, and I had to defer that. And I did an internship in that time, and in my deferred year, and a job came up at Zurich, and I went for it thinking, if I need a degree, I'm meant to go and get one. If not, I'll see how the cards lie. And they took me on. So I qualified as an actuary at Zurich without a degree, which was kind of the first individual to do that at Zurich, and kind of it's not something that's really spoken about either. And now I've rotated around finance functions, and now doing kind of a little bit of time as a commercial manager, getting more familiar with how our business runs. So yeah, that's a rough and ready overview.
Thank you. Natalie?
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Gallagher. I co-run a software development, web tech type of company and AI solution company alongside my husband. My formal role name is COO, so Chief Operating Officer, but really what that means is I do everything. We're a small company, so that really does mean that. I started my career in technology many years ago, and I kind of just fell into it. I left school not really knowing what I wanted to do. So I chose a Bachelor of Commerce degree because I figured, well, whatever's going to happen, I can use business. And in my second year of studies, I was sitting next to my friend and she was doing flowcharts. And I was like, what are you doing? And so she showed me flowcharts. She was doing business analysis and systems analysis. And I'd never come across that before. Honestly, I'd never touched a computer before. It's my second year of university. And so based on what she was doing, I signed up for what was called Business Information Systems. And I loved it. Due to some personal situations, I could not actually do that as my major. And I just completed my business commerce degree, and I just took the first job I could because we didn't have a lot of money and I needed to pay bills. And that happened to be an insurance underwriter. So there I was doing that. And they were converting their systems into a mainframe system, and they needed testers. And of course, I put my hand up, and what was supposed to be a 6-week thing turned into a 6-month thing. And anybody who's worked in IT will understand how these projects, you know, scope creep, and they just carry on and carry on. And it came to a time in my testing where they wanted me to sign off on what had been developed, but it was worse. What they developed would have made the underwriters' jobs worse, and so I refused to sign off. They did not like that because they were like, well, this is the spec. I'm like, well, I didn't write the spec. So if you want somebody, so anyway, I put my foot down, so at this point, I've been in work. I was in my early 20s. It was not well received, but I couldn't put my name against something that I didn't believe in. So then, as part of that, I was working very closely with a programmer, and I was sitting next to her, telling her how the business ran. Literally, this is what we do on a day-to-day basis. And she turned around to me and she said, do you want to do programming? I'm like, yes, please. And so she got me into the IT department, and we had a woman manager. She was running the whole thing. And that woman turned my life around because I've suffered with low self-confidence, and I did not have my driver's license. I was 26 by this point. And she was like, no woman is going to work for me who doesn't have a driver's license. Here's a car allowance. Go and get driving lessons and get a car. And so she pushed me a lot. And that's what I needed. So I did what she said. And then I wanted to leave South Africa like a lot of South Africans. I was born and raised in South Africa. And it was with my IT skills that I was able to move to England. And I worked in England for JP Morgan doing mainframe programming for 5 years. And they had an opportunity to open up in their New York office. And I wanted to go to New York. And so I put my hand up and I was able to go to New York. They paid for relocation package, which was amazing. They put me up in Manhattan. I lived in Manhattan and I did work for them. And when the user base moved, I moved with them down to Delaware. And the rest is history because at that point, I met my now husband. He was also in IT. He was in a different branch of IT. He was in web development, web design. And my whole career has gone like this, where I've taken a look at what other people are doing and I'll be like, show me what you're doing, please, because I want to learn what you're doing. And I had been frustrated with the very bland kind of programming I was doing. I was doing programming for investment banking. for JP Morgan. And our screens were black and everything was green text, and I was frustrated. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And so he showed me what he did with web design, and all of a sudden all these like things went off in my head. I'm like, I can use my IT skills and like make pretty pictures. Sign me up. So he then became a mentor, and he trained me on web design. Fast forward years, children, blah blah blahs. And I moved from web design into marketing, because marketing is a really good fit when it comes to websites and getting them actually found online. And now, of owning this company, I find myself in a supportive role where I'm picking up things like accounting and business development and all these hats that you wear as a business owner. But my heart is in web design and making things function really well. And our company moved into AI about 3 years ago. And I've just found myself in a training role as well, because, helping people understand how AI can help them, and trying to address some of the fears around AI. I've, I guess, reinvented myself, reinvented my career a few times over my life, and I recognize how uncomfortable that feels. And so it kind of, the training side of it feels like a natural fit. And I guess that's what led me here today. So why LoveTech? Actually, when I was back in America, where I was working for small business clients, and I'd developed a system of web design where I know I could train people up to do it pretty low cost. And I was motivated to help other women do that, because I would see so many women who were 100% dependent on men. Sorry, men in the room. And that didn't feel right to me. It's only because of my IT skills and my tech skills that I've been able to have opportunities that have come up. And I felt that I could help people. Actually, I bought a domain called WebGirls, but I never actually did much more with it than that. And then when we got to the Isle of Man, I learned about LoveTech, and I'm like, that's the thing. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
I'm Harley. I got into tech about 5 years ago. Before I got into tech, at school, I loved science, I loved maths, I loved everything. I probably liked tech the least. But I went through A-levels and I dropped out within a few months because I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I wanted to do everything. A year later, I started an art course at the college. I went to do art history at university, and I went to Leeds, and I'm just not a city person. So I dropped out before the end of the year. Just didn't settle in, didn't feel like I fit there. Came back and I just did like whatever job I could get. I was working in admin for a while. I scanned a lot of things. I worked in a care home for about 3 months, and that was the longest job I'd ever had, was 3 months. And then I became ill and I was out of work for about 2 years. And at the end of when I was starting to get better and thinking I can go back into work now, COVID hit. So there were no jobs available. And thankfully the government set up a summer internship scheme. And it was designed for graduates. I wasn't a graduate, but I went for it anyway. And in their application form, they said, what do you want to do? And when I was a kid, I was on this website called Neopets, if anyone remembers it. And you had like these little web pages for your pets. And you could use like HTML and CSS to like customize what the page looked like. And it was really fun. And so in my application form, I said that I knew a bit of HTML and CSS from then. And I said that I thought tech was really cool and it'd be nice to do something in tech. And I got a phone call a few days later from a guy that ran a business over here, and he was like, oh, I've seen you're interested or whatever. Have you heard of jQuery? And I was like, no. Have you heard of Bootstrap? No. Have you heard of, and reeling off loads of things that I'd never heard of before. And I was like, oh, great. And he was like, well, do you want to start on Monday? And Okay. So I started, and I was like, I've said that I know a bit of HTML and CSS, but I haven't written anything in years. So I went on Udemy and I did a 1-week crash course in how to build a website. Um, and so I started on the Monday and didn't know half the things that my boss was talking about. Constantly asking questions. He was like, "Oh, this thing, I'm sure you're familiar with this." No. And I had a 6-week internship. The end of the internship was coming up, and I was like, "Oh, great, I don't know what I'm going to do." Started trying to send my CV out to places, but the longest I'd had a job was 3 months. I was 24. I'd had a 2-year gap in my CV. It's not the most appealing prospect. And then I got offered a job by the guy that I got the internship with. And so I've been there ever since, basically. And yeah, so I've gone, 5 years, I've gone from like not really knowing anything. Now I build websites, I build mobile apps, I build web apps. I work in a small team, so there's only 3 of us. There's me, there's my boss, and then there's a designer called Claire. And we work together to build products for local companies and then companies off island. And because we're such a small team, I get to do like weird stuff. Like I get to write proposals, I get to go to meetings, I can do a bit of the back end and a bit of the front end and chip in wherever I'm needed. And it's through that job as well that I got involved in LoveTech, because that company did the website for LoveTech. And it had been a while, and I'd worked on some more changes on the website, and I was like, "Oh, this is a bit ridiculous that I'm working on the website and there's all these mentors and they're doing such great work and I'm too shy to get involved." So I sent an email. I think I'd met Martina at an event, and I sent an email and was like, "Can I get involved?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." So I got involved that way.
And we're very glad to have Harley. Harley also did our panel last year as well. It's been really stepping outside your comfort zone, haven't you? So both Natalie and Harley talked about role models and people who sponsored you and effectively kind of gave you an opportunity or a chance. And Georgia, is there anyone that stands out for you that's been a role model or a supporter or a mentor to you?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started my role as a trainee actuary, it was in February 2020 I got offered the job, and April 2020 when I started, and everyone was in lockdown, similar to Harley. It felt like everything was on fire because no one had worked from home. We were doing financial closes where I didn't even know what the role really was. And also with that, 2 of my female colleagues were on maternity, and so it was me in a team with 5 males, and my manager was female. And I remember probably for the first 6 to 9 months, I was really questioning, was I in the right place? I thought, I do not belong here. I don't even know what they're talking about. We have no shared interests. Like, I really don't know if this is the career for me, even though throughout all of high school, career advisors within school saw what I naturally enjoyed and the grades I was getting. They always said, "Oh, actuarial will be a good path for you." And then I was in it, I thought, why am I here? Like, I really don't fit in. And then I remember telling my manager that, and her saying to me, "Well, no, well, that's your asset. That you don't think the same as those around you, and that is the difference." And even though she's no longer my manager, she's someone that I really like bounce ideas off. There's times where, I'll question things or question how I feel about things and wonder, is it just me? And she's always been a great role model and saying, no, it's not, and she's had great success and kind of carved a path as a female actuary who's now on the board. And I think having someone who was just able to validate how I was feeling and now be able to have that trusted relationship and knowing that things kind of feel confidential in what we're saying and there's no judgment, but having someone who can also say to me, "Yeah, I think you are overthinking that one, Georgia." But I think having that has really made a difference, especially right at the start where I felt like I didn't belong.
Fantastic. Thank you. Natalie, can I ask you about the dreaded imposter syndrome that we're all having sitting here, and how you face those sort of challenges, gender bias?
So I suffer from, hi, my name's Natalie. I have imposter syndrome all the time. The first time I encountered it, I was in high school. I was like, what is this feeling where I just feel like I'm a faker? And it was like, I must be a faker because I feel like one. It's taken me many years to understand that that is imposter syndrome, and many people have it, and I still have it, but now I recognize what it is. And I will tell you, men have it too, not just women, although women have it more than men, I think.
Or own up to it.
Or own up to it, yes. I think, yes, definitely. I do think that women are a little more open. One of the things that I've developed over the years, I didn't start out my life like this, is I'm pretty transparent. Like, you'll hear me talking about my nervousness coming up here. I never used to be like that, but I think that's actually one of the ways that I cope with these things, is by voicing my insecurities. It probably is painful for people around me, but I feel like when I voice them, they lose their power over me. And I think imposter syndrome is fake. So what I mean by that is that it's not that it doesn't exist. It does exist, but it comes from a place of, it's just new. It doesn't mean that you're an actual imposter. And I just have had many years of reminding myself of that, and other people reminding me of that now I just hear those voices in my head now. When I'm feeling imposter syndrome, I hear those voices. And it does help when you work through it, you be brave anyway, and you just do it, and then it works out well. And if you have enough of those works out well moments that you can like pull on when you're feeling like that, it helps you get through. My goal is to get to a point of not having that, but I don't know if that'll ever come. What else did you ask me?
About gender bias.
Oh, gender bias. Oh yeah, that's a juicy one. So I'm thinking a lot about my corporate career when I was in corporate. It definitely went on then, but I don't know that I was very aware of it. It just kind of would happen, and it would be very subtle, and I wouldn't be called on roles that I probably should have been called on. I'm much more aware of it now. I think that it happens, a lot of it is unconscious bias. I'm very aware of it now, actually, and I frequently come across, particularly in the AI space, this, however few women there are in tech, there's fewer women in the AI space. And I frequently have men mansplaining AI to me. And I just stand there and listen. I'm like, okay, all right, carry on. Show me your colors. Just show me your colors. I don't know that there's anything that you can do about it. I think if you're in a corporate situation, I think it's tricky because I don't know what you do about it. I would not advise anybody going to HR about it. I think that would be a bad career move. I have encountered it very much on a business level. So in 2016, I moved out of corporate and into joined my husband in his small company, and I was looking after small clients, whereas he was looking after enterprise clients. So I was doing quite a lot of business networking and business development. So I was doing a lot of business networking, and I actually felt more gender bias in that space than I did in my actual tech corporate side of things, which was very interesting. To the point where I got to a sort of an idea that, well, maybe I should only be working with women business owners, because it felt like insurmountable climbing this bias that exists. So I don't think I've really made any kind of headway or peace with it. It's just I'm much more aware of it now than I ever was.
Well, I think you become more aware of it the older you get. And,
Yeah.
And that's part of what Love Tech do. It's about the positive change. It's about what we can do to support positive equality.
And I would,
Sitting up here and being a role model
Yeah.
and being a mentor is a huge part of that.
one of the things I like to do is to find male allies and kind of what's the word, amplify their voices, because any women are not in the minority, but we're treated as if we are. Any minority is going to have a hard time fighting it from their perspective. It needs to be fought from the majority. And so I try to amplify those ally voices, and they do exist. It's not a lot of them, but they do exist.
Thank you. Harley, can I ask you about staying courageous? So in those moments when you've had setbacks, which you've mentioned, how did you keep moving? How did you get over those? What strategies did you use?
I think like I tried to be like strong and like maybe confident, but I think a lot of the time it ends up being that I lean on other people, but not necessarily in a bad way, I hope. But I have my mum and I have my sister, and sort of in a weird kind of opposite of a doom loop, each of us kind of support each other. And if I'm like, oh, I don't feel good about this or whatever, and they're like, but can you not see the progress you've made? Or like the other way around, and my mum won't be feeling confident in her career, and it's like, but this is really cool, mum. Like, how do you not see this? And so we all support each other, and each of us thinks that the other two are like amazing, and like I'm the sort of the runt of the three of us or whatever, but it's not like that. Like, I think so my mum, when I was at uni, she got made redundant. And she decided to set up her own business. And so she builds websites as well. And then my sister did A-levels, and then I think she dropped out in the second year of A-levels, and then trained to become an accountant. And then now she's like C-suite of a company over here. And it's like, and I went to uni and dropped out, and I was like, oh great, I'm the first one of us to go to uni. And I really messed this up. But I think, yeah, having the support from other women is really helpful. And like, I'll whinge at my sister all the time about like, oh, like I've heard these guys say this or whatever. Thankfully not in my job, but often if you're like networking or you'll see it out there. And then my sister will be like, oh yeah, because she's C-suite. And she went into a meeting and they asked her if she could grab the teas. And she's like, but I'm chief investment officer, what are you doing? And so we can vent with each other. So anything we're struggling with, we can all sort of like help each other carry it, which I think makes things a lot easier.
Thank you. Brilliant answer. Georgia, what technical or non-technical skills do you consider to be essential for your job?
I think for the technical, I think it's where I naturally have my skill set. I think it's that mathematical side, that my brain is naturally analytical, and that's been able to carry me through not only in my work experience, but also in my exams. Working and studying at the same time is a lot. And so sometimes it does take, and I think tie into some of those like mechanisms that help. I think it's really important to be nice to yourself, talking positive to myself, particularly when I felt like I didn't know, and telling myself, I can do this, or, and I'm not saying that I'm always nice to myself. My default probably isn't to be, but I know when I really need to step up, that positive affirmations, those sorts of things carry me through. But going back to your question, I think non-technical things that have been able to make me be a difference within my role is my ability to talk. And sometimes being in a room full of introverts in the actuarial space, I'd come out of meetings thinking, oh my gosh, I've just spoken nonstop there. And then I'd replay everything over my head. When actually that can be my asset. that I am able to communicate to non-technical audiences about my technical field, that I'm able to know my technical field inside and out, because that's something that I was passionate about. I was fortunate that I was guided into a career where my skill set lay. And so having something that's so maths driven really aligns with just how I tick and how my brain naturally operates. So I think being able to pair those things together has really helped me in my career, in also highlighting that although I feel unusual for being a chatty actuary, it's been able to be a difference.
It's a Pulp Fiction. It's going to be quoted on the website. We are with Chatty Actuary. It's a brand name.
Thank you. Chatty Actuary is definitely going to be one on your mental profile book and feature. Natalie, are there mistakes you made early on that, what have you learned from the most?
Lack of confidence. It's been a big problem my whole life, and I wonder how things would have been if I had more confidence. And I've made plenty of mistakes in my life. I could tell you about some doozies when it comes to investment bank programming issues. But I've actually changed my view on mistakes. I think mistakes are just learning opportunities. I don't know if it's a mistake, but a big challenge in my life was moving to America from England and tying myself to a corporate from an immigration perspective. That was very, very tough. And I was very vulnerable. And there were some things that happened that they weren't good things that happened. And I do wonder, was that a mistake? But then I probably wouldn't have ended up in America, and I wouldn't have met my husband. And, there's a whole lot of buts. So I don't know. I don't know if I have like actual mistakes. I mean, I've made mistakes.
The mistakes aren't mistakes.
Yeah, they're all learning opportunities, and we can come back from them. Maybe when I was talking about sort of gender bias and that, I was laid off from a boutique small design agency when I was 7 months pregnant. And in retrospect, that wasn't my mistake, but in retrospect, I think there was some discrimination going on there, and I let it go. Was it a mistake? Maybe I should have fought that. Maybe, I don't know. But I was more interested in having my baby, so.
Thanks, Natalie. Harley, how do you keep up to speed? How do you keep up with change, and what do you do to kind of keep yourself up to date with things?
I think working in tech, it's like, because everything is constantly moving, there's a little element of me that's like, well, I'm not going to be able to keep up with all of it. So sort of resigning yourself to that a little bit and taking a step back and thinking, okay, what do I want to pay attention to out of this giant whirlwind of stuff? So I really like the accessibility side of tech, and the sustainability and sort of tech for good side. So I kind of narrow in on those areas where I find really interesting. And then I've sort of over time realized that I, for some reason, don't like watching videos, but I love reading stuff. So everything is like a newsletter or a book or whatever that I subscribe to. And I've also noticed, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that I've managed to follow a lot of women in tech. And a lot of them talk about really great things. So there's some wonderful like accessibility specialists that are women, and a lot of sort of front end, which is my area that I love more than anything. A lot of them that are women that are they're the top of their field. They're not, I haven't picked them because they're a woman. It's just they happen to be writing the best stuff. But I think as well, like, maybe you gravitate towards things that sort of resonate with you more. But you can also equally fall into the trap of listening to a lot of the tech bros or whatever you want to call it that are on the extreme ends of like either the internet is about to die or AI is going to kill you or whatever. And very often that comes from the sort of overhyped sort of influencers who tend to be male in the tech space. And so to make myself feel better about the future of the world, I do tend to lean towards the female techies that post things that, not to say that men post stuff that's rubbish, I just mean that there happen to be a lot of grounded women out there that write really wonderful things that I use to kind of keep myself fueled and up to date with things.
People might be asking me for some recommendations at the end, maybe, for those people. I will be. Georgia, you said you work in a male-dominated team. How do you advocate for inclusion and equity now, as somebody that's getting to grips with their career, and apart from Love Tech, obviously?
Number one, Love Tech. I think there's kind of two examples I can kind of draw on for this. So now I've qualified as an actuary, I've moved away from that field and broadening myself. That when we've had new recruits join finance where I started and they've been young females, I've been seeking them out and talking to them and having time to talk about my experiences and to understand them better in their work experience up to this point, and just to get to know them, but also speaking out about things that I struggled with, things that I found really hard. You know, when I first started, I had a male colleague say to me, "You'll never pass the exams with that degree."
Wow.
And he didn't even know me. And when I was doing my A-levels, because I was ill, I underperformed. And so that always felt like a burden on me that I didn't do as well as I could have. So putting my CV out there, I felt like it never really represented me. And so going into a role then that was exam driven, I was always thinking like, I don't know if I'm good enough for this because I don't have a degree. I underperformed in my last qualifications. And so I've actively spoken to our new recruits who are particularly female and said to them, you know, I also had men say to me, "Oh, that exam, that one's easy." They're not. None of the actuarial exams are easy. You see Heather kind of agreeing with me there. And so talking to them and say, you might have people say, "Oh, that one's easy," "Oh, you don't really need to study for that one," and actually saying to them, you know, I studied extremely hard. I didn't tell the people around me how hard I was working, because I would use these comments that I'd hear as fuel, just be like, well, just see, you know. And so I've openly spoken to them about what comments they might hear from people that might be overly confident compared to their abilities, but been able to, but you know, been able to say you might hear these things, and so when you're thinking, "Gosh, this is hard," like I resonated with that, and I've been able to qualify. I've been able to qualify quicker than the average actuary, and so I think really talking about that and that being my first piece is whenever I identify new young females within the industry that I work, I really try and talk to them to begin with, just to kind of validate anything that they might be feeling. It's like I said earlier, those first couple 6-9 months that I was in that industry, I felt like I didn't belong. So anything that I can kind of validate that they do belong, these feelings they have are true. And if anything, it can drive them that their ability is still there, regardless of what noise they hear. But I think from the other perspective, something that I've tried to do is for people that I have good relationships with, is calling out whenever I felt triggered. So, like I said, being in a room, particularly like in lessons where I was one of the few females, and this is something that I did like my personal studies on, is that there'd be times that I wouldn't put my hand up unless I knew, because I'm representing the women in the room here and I don't want to show that I'm wrong. And I wouldn't want to be around all these lads that are all jarring together and throw any answers because they don't care. They're with all their mates. And so I realized that was something that I carry with me. And like when I had to do a piece of work, and the numbers looked unusual. And so I triple checked that myself, think, I don't think that's right. Triple checked it. No, I think it's right because this and this. And then I gave it to another colleague. And I knew that this tone is just something that they would say with anyone. But they went, no, 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 that can't be right. And that really triggered me. And it took me a minute of like self-reflecting, and I had like an evening just think, why did I feel that way? Why did I recoil and not want to contribute to that conversation after that? And I think it was tied from all of my lived experiences of not seeing very many women in the room with me, and feeling that whenever I wanted to contribute, like as a subconscious thing, is knowing that I'm right with it. And so having a male colleague say to me no and being dismissive of something that I've checked is right. But I have a really good relationship with them, and I know that that wasn't because I was female. I know they have that tone, and that's just their style. And so I took them to one side. Well, I spoke to a mentor that I have and just said, is that me? Like, I felt really uncomfortable. I don't know whether to talk about it because I feel like that was me. That's me, like my experiences. That's like my trauma, you know? And they said, well, what do you do if someone said that they had that experience? What if someone said that they were uncomfortable? I said, well, I'd tell them to tell that person if they felt like there was a good enough relationship for that. And so she just looked at me. Obviously, I was just giving myself advice. And so I went and I spoke to them. And I didn't go in a tone to say, you made me feel really bad about this. I went to say, oh, you know that example of this piece of work we did yesterday? And it made me feel a certain way. And I know that you have this approach with everyone. And I know that this is how I've interpreted it. And I can't tell you, like, I can't really control too much how that gut feel feels. But I know that I wanted to recoil, and it really triggered me. It made me feel like I wasn't enough. And I don't know what we can do about it, but I just want to let you know. And he was really receptive. I think because my approach was positive, I wasn't trying to blame. And I think that's made a difference going forward, is that this colleague, like that's their style, whether it's right or wrong, that's their style, and that's their style they have with everyone. But being able to talk about that, and that really opened up conversations about how I feel as a female in the room, you know, and whether that's, you know, giving examples where sometimes, you know, you feel like you've been spoken over or anything like that. You know, having a colleague now that I've got a trusted relationship with, and I've been able to kind of call out things and examples that, because when I gave this example, he went, oh, was that piece of work? You know, I noticed that actually, and I didn't know what happened, but I thought I'd leave it with you, sort of thing. And so now I've been able to like actually have more of that like advocacy for women in the rooms, and like how these things that are just like mannerisms or just how people talk is actually has weighting, and it can trigger feelings. And so I think I try to do both, is be like that new kind of mentor, I'd hope, for the new young females that are coming through, and validate how they could be feeling, whilst also trying to call out behaviours where I think it's a constructive relationship to do so.
Thank you. It's difficult to get a balance right, isn't it? Because you're scared of sort of putting your head above the parapet sometimes. But having the support of your colleagues is a wonderful thing. So, Natalie, running your own business, and you've got family, how are you balancing work life?
I don't.
Is there such a thing?
I'm really bad at that. Running your own business gives you freedom, in my opinion. It doesn't mean that you work less than when you work in a more corporate environment. In fact, I'm probably working double the amount of hours than I ever did in corporate. But the freedom to be able to not work at a specific time, to take care of the kids, is actually the reason why I went into it in the first place. I did not grow up wanting to be an entrepreneur. I'm way more about stability than that. But when I had my kids late in life. I was 40 and 44 when I had my kids. And that's largely to do with moving around a lot and my career. But I found it very difficult to, at the time when I had my children, we were living an hour and a half drive from my work. And so I was commuting a lot. And then that was an hour and a half without any traffic, without any accidents or anything. And some days it was 3-hour drive one way, so 6 hours traveling. And so there was days that I just wouldn't see our daughter at all, and that was just breaking my heart. So that's what led me to working for myself or for joining my husband in his company. In many ways, it's harder. I find it harder because it's less. It feels less stable when you work for yourself than when you work for like a big corporate. But the freedom of being able to go to my child's, sporting thing, which I wasn't able to do when I was working in the corporate environment, it's priceless. I can't put a thing on that. So I don't really feel like I have work-life balance. At the moment anyway, especially coming to the island. We're new to the island. We've only been here for 2 years. So establishing yourself, it's not a new business. We've been in business for ourselves for many years, but moving over here, it is a new business. And when you start a new business, it's hectic. It's full on. And we're still in that literally startup phase. And so I'm not managing it very well, quite honestly. I feel very blessed that we're on the island because my children are safe here. If I don't get home at a specific time, I know the worst is not going to happen. They can be at home. They're 10 and 14 now. They can be at home without the worst thing happening. So I take a lot of comfort from that. And it is the biggest reasons we moved out of America was for our children. I don't think our children are seeing us enough, both of us, my husband and myself. But I do think that life comes in seasons and in waves. And I know this is not going to be forever. And I know there's going to be a time where, like last week, we went off to Amsterdam for, a conference. Did we just party that whole time? Absolutely not. In fact, we were doing accounting. But that's what comes from having your own business. So sorry, I don't have a better answer on that one.
So same in her experience on like
Yeah.
rural business.
Yeah. Well, I meant to actually say that. I was being transparent with my feelings about doing things like this with my daughter. I was talking to her about it, and she looked at me kind of surprised. She was like, "But Mom, you've done all these things, and you've got these businesses and everything." She said, "You're amazing. You're super smart." I'm like, I'd never seen myself through her eyes, and that meant everything. So when you talk about like why we do this, I'm doing it for her, not even my son, but for her. So
Thank you. Harley, I wanted to ask you about emerging trends or exciting tech. Have you got any? You said you follow some interesting people. What excites you about the future?
I don't know if I'm going to sound really unusual to say not, like my answer isn't AI necessarily. But I think part of my excitement for the future is looking back at history. We've made so many strides, whether like for women or for technology or whatever. Things have changed and gotten arguably in some places worse, but also a lot better. And so I'm excited about what the future holds in the positive side of things. I think I sort of like where there's like a big trend like AI, you also seem to get lots of sort of smaller offshoots around it of people that are like, okay, we're not gonna like go all in on this. We're gonna like take a step back and be a bit reserved and appreciate the fact that there's some really cool stuff coming out of this that we're gonna get really excited about. But we're also still gonna pay attention to the risks and the threats that can pose. And so seeing people stand up and be able to have nuanced conversations about that kind of thing makes me hopeful that the future is going to be positive and hopefully not too many extremes of we're going to be killed by robots or we're all going to be staring into small smartphones for the rest of our lives. And I think sort of seeing the reaction to technologies like AI, you see like the people that are really focused on other humans. So not necessarily just replacing everything with AI, but seeing how AI can enable people to do the things that they want to do. So avoid doing the things that they don't want to. And yeah, things like I don't necessarily get excited about AI in terms of like art or that kind of thing, but I do get excited about it where it gives people tools to make the visions and the art that they do want to make quicker or easier to communicate. And so I'm excited in that sort of space of things where it's still human-led and human-first, but AI can help us to do more of what we want and care about.
Thank you. Natalie, can I ask you about what changes or progress you can see in the future, perhaps 5 to 10 years for women in tech? No, just a small question.
Gosh, that's huge. I think we have a lot of work to do. And I keep harping on this report. Those who've been in the digital Isle of Man training that my husband and I put on for AI have seen me talk about this report from PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. I mean, you guys know what I mean. In there, buried quite deeply, is a section about the effect that AI will have on women in particular. And in some ways, it's worse because of the kinds of roles that the majority of women have. A lot of those roles are probably going to be automatable and replaced by AI. This report anyway, is predicting is going to have a disproportionate effect on women. So I think about that a lot. I actually have a very optimistic view on AI. I have ever since ChatGPT hit the mainstream. But the disproportionate effect on women is what is forefront in my mind. And I think that we have to take it by the horns and ride that bull. I don't know how else to say that. Like we have to just make it our own. And if that means training programs or it means advocacy or it means policy, I don't know what it means. But we need to be talking about that because I don't want to see women go backwards. It worries me greatly, the direction that America's going when it comes to diversity and equity and the policies that they're just reversing. We left America before that all came into play. But what effect that's going to have on the rest of the world and where that's going to leave the rest of the world, I'm very worried about that. There are groups in America who are trying to stand up against it, but it is a big battle. And so in places like Isle of Man, where we don't have the same restrictions at a governmental level around diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think we need to stand up and do something about it. What I think.
Okay, we better get together on you then.
Yeah. Like I'm really thinking about classes for women in AI, like ChatGPT for women, because I feel like as women, and I am generalizing, and I know not all women are like me, but I think we do step back. Naturally, a lot of us step back, particularly in an audience of men. And we are hesitant. I was hesitant to get involved in the AI space, actually. My husband was all gung-ho, and he's like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. I'm like, I don't know enough. I need to know. You're talking about expertise, right? I'm like, I need to know everything so that I can feel confident in talking about it. But the truth is, nobody really knows everything about AI because it's changing all the time, right? So it took me a few months to find a little bit of confidence to step up and talk about what I do know around it. And that's helped so many people. So we need to do more of it.
Just to pick up on that note, so Love Tech, you're on a programme called Tech Comes in the new year of every year, and it's a 6-week programme, and one of the modules is covering AI, or is completely about AI, I think now. and Natalie helped on that.
We
one.
did the programming.
And we had Chris Keswick. So there was that will be available soon for booking on our website, along with modules on all sorts of things: money matters, staying safe online, how to keep your kids safe when they're gaming, and that kind of thing. So just to round up then, and let everyone ask you questions if they have any. Georgia, if I could ask you, what message would you send to your younger self?
So I was given this top as a coincidence. It was the one that was available when I helped mentoring at the Girls Coding Robotics workshop. And I think growing up, I was always a perfectionist. And so I would always have planned what was going to be next. And I would have always achieved, and it would have all been perfect, which in reality you can't do. And I would have had, I think, even though it was horrendous at the time, losing my health really shook me out of that and made me realize that, sometimes just getting by is okay. And also, I think it really ties in with what you were saying about mistakes, that it's all just learning. And I think if I could tell my younger self is just that everything would be okay, even if it's not on that plan, it's not that you're getting 100%, like that's okay. And wherever you land, that's where you're meant to be, and you'll make something of it. And I think that's what I'd give myself is, I think I was always super intense and always really hard on myself too. And I think just getting out of that mindset really helps to then take every success and actually celebrate. I think just we don't do that enough as women, is celebrating ourselves and celebrating the women around us for like the great things that we're doing, instead of thinking, oh well, I didn't quite do that. I think so often when I was younger, I should have just stopped and been like, wow, I just did that. And so I think that's how I'd hope to like reflect back on.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was wonderful. And thank you for your honesty and sharing with us. I hope everyone has enjoyed it and found it useful. Please follow us on socials, and thank you very much.